The avoidant will not say it, not directly, not in the clean, unambiguous language of someone who has identified what they are feeling and decided that expressing it honestly is the appropriate next step. That sequence, feeling, identifying, expressing, is not the sequence the avoidance system runs. Their sequence is different. Feeling, managing, containing. And the containing is thorough enough that the direct expression of missing someone is for many avoidants, in many circumstances, simply not an available output. But the missing does not disappear because the direct expression of it is unavailable. It finds other routes, quieter ones, less consciously controlled ones. The routes that exist below the level of the management, below the deliberate, practiced, largely automatic system of distance maintenance that the avoidant has been running for most of their relational life. These routes produce signals, not loud ones, not the obvious, unmistakable signals of someone who is visibly struggling with the absence of a person they care about. Quiet ones, the kind that require genuine attention to detect, the kind that are easy to miss if the attention is not specifically calibrated toward the particular, inverted language that avoidant psychology speaks when it is communicating something the behavior is simultaneously working to conceal. 3 of these signals are worth examining in genuine depth, not as the definitive list of everything an avoidance missing can produce. The specific expressions are as varied as the specific people. But as the 3 that appear with the most consistency, the 3 that are most reliably present when the missing is genuine and the direct expression of it is, as usual, unavailable to the avoidance behavioral system. The first signal is the reach that has no stated reason. Contact that arrives without the scaffolding of an obvious purpose. Without the question that needs answering, the logistical matter that requires addressing, the specific content that would justify the reach in terms that do not require the acknowledgement of the actual motivation behind it. The avoidant who is not missing someone does not reach without reason. The avoidance system does not generate unprompted contact as a default expression of ongoing connection. That kind of reaching requires the sustained orientation toward another person that the pattern was built to prevent. When contact happens without the specific motivation of a practical need, it tends to happen because something else is generating it. Something that the stated reason, however thin, however transparently insufficient as an explanation for why contact was made, is serving to cover. The something else is the missing, the specific interior directional quality of genuinely wanting the person's presence, that the avoidance system has not been able to manage into silence. The reach without reason is the missing finding its only available expression. The contact that can be made without explicitly acknowledging the desire for contact, that can be initiated without the full vulnerability of saying I wanted to hear from you, that can carry the actual motivation covertly within the structure of a different, more manageable stated purpose. Notice the reach. Notice the thinness of the reason. Notice the gap between what is being offered as the explanation and what the actual need for contact suggests is underneath it. That gap is the signal, the missing pressing through the only route the management made available. The second signal is the engagement with the peripheral, not direct contact, not the reach that carries even a thin stated reason. Something quieter than that. The specific, sustained, ongoing awareness of the person that expresses itself not through direct engagement, but through the engagement with things adjacent to the person without engaging with the person directly. This signal is perhaps the most subtle of the 3, and the most easy to dismiss as coincidence, or to miss entirely if the attention is not specifically looking for the pattern rather than the individual instance. Because any single instance of peripheral engagement can be explained away, a coincidental intersection, an organic encounter with something that happens to be adjacent to the person, the kind of incidental awareness that simply follows from having known someone. But the pattern of peripheral engagement, sustained over time, does not have the quality of coincidence. It has the quality of sustained interior orientation toward the person expressing itself through the only channels the avoidance management has not entirely closed. It reveals, through the specific consistency of its adjacency, that the person is still the reference point, still the interior location that the attention keeps finding its way back to, even when the direct expression of that finding is not available. The peripheral engagement is the avoidant remaining in the vicinity of someone they are missing, without the exposure of remaining in direct contact. It is the closest the management allows them to get to saying, I am still here, I am still oriented toward you, the missing is not resolved into indifference, without actually saying any of those things, without the vulnerability of the direct expression. Without the exposure of the acknowledged wanting, it is the missing in its most indirect form. Genuine, real, quietly present in the orbit of the person rather than in their direct space. The third signal is the quality of the response when contact does occur. Not the frequency of the contact, that will be lower than it should be characteristically, because the avoidance management consistently suppresses the initiation of contact even when the genuine wanting to make contact is present. But the quality, the specific texture of the response when contact happens, through whatever means, in whatever form. The avoidant who is not missing someone responds to contact from that person with the managed, appropriate, sufficient but not warm quality of someone who is maintaining a functional social relationship, without genuine interior investment. The response is fine. It is adequate. It communicates nothing beyond the basic social acknowledgement that the contact was received and is being addressed. The avoidant who is missing someone responds differently. The response has a quality that the management did not fully intercept before it was expressed, a specificity that goes beyond what the functional social response requires, a warmth that is slightly more present than the situation strictly calls for, a quickness, the response arriving faster than the pattern's default of managed delay would typically produce. A depth of engagement with the specific content of the contact that reveals a quality of attention that was already present before the contact arrived, an attention that was already oriented toward the person, already engaged with the interior representation of them, already in the specific alertness of someone who was, at some level, waiting. That quality in the response is the missing made briefly visible. The management, caught slightly off guard by the arrival of actual contact after the period of its absence, produces the response before the full filter is deployed. And what emerges in that slightly less filtered moment is the genuine interior reality, the actual quality of the ongoing orientation toward the person, the actual warmth that the missing has been carrying, the actual engagement that the silence was covering. These three signals, the reach without reason, the peripheral engagement, the quality of the response, are not proof of anything that resolves the fundamental question of whether the genuine interior missing will ever find its way to adequate behavioral expression. They are not the guarantee of change, not the promise of the showing up that genuine love deserves to become, not the evidence that the gap between the interior reality and the behavioral expression is closing through the genuine work that closing it requires. They are what they are. Evidence of genuine missing in the interior of someone whose direct expression of that missing is not currently available to them. Evidence that the silence is not the same as not caring, that the management is covering something real rather than expressing the absence of something real. What to do with that evidence is the genuine question, and it has been explored throughout this conversation with the honesty it deserves. The evidence of genuine missing does not obligate continued availability, does not require the door to remain open indefinitely, does not constitute the showing up that the person who is missed deserves to receive. It is simply the accurate picture of what the silence contains. Real missing, imperfectly expressed, in the only forms the management currently makes available. Quiet, peripheral, present in the quality of what surfaces when the filter is briefly insufficient. Real, and not yet enough. Both. Still, the reach without reason deserves more examination than its surface description provides. Because the avoidant reaching out without an obvious stated purpose is not a simple or unambiguous signal. It has layers, and reading it accurately, rather than reading it through the filter of either hope or hurt, requires sitting with the full complexity of what it is and what it is not. What it is, the genuine missing finding a route through the management, the interior orientation toward the person pressing against the system's suppression of direct expression, and finding the compromise of indirect contact. The reach that carries the actual wanting covertly within the structure of something more manageable, a thin reason, a casual check-in, the forwarding of something tangentially relevant, the question that did not genuinely require asking. All of these are real expressions of the missing. The missing is genuinely there, and the reach is genuinely produced by it. What it is not, a commitment, a change. The beginning of the showing up that genuine love requires to be receivable. The evidence that the gap between the interior reality and the behavioral expression is closing. The signal that what follows the reach will be different in quality from what preceded it. The reach without reason can exist, and frequently does exist, as a permanent feature of the avoidant dynamic without ever developing into the sustained, consistent, ordinary day's presence that the genuine missing would ideally produce. The avoidant can reach periodically, genuinely motivated by the missing, and then retreat again when the reach produces the proximity that activates the fear that produces the distance. The cycle of reach and retreat is itself a pattern, and a pattern of reaching without the sustained follow-through of genuine presence is not evidence of change. It is evidence of the missing being real and the capacity for adequate expression of it remaining insufficient. This distinction matters enormously for the person receiving the reach, because the reach feels significant. It arrives after silence, and it carries the specific weight of something that broke through the management, something that the avoidance system was working to suppress and that pressed through anyway. That quality of having broken through gives the reach a particular emotional intensity that can be read as more meaningful than it actually is in terms of what it signals about the dynamic's trajectory. The reach is meaningful as evidence of genuine missing. It is not meaningful as evidence of genuine change. And those two things, genuine missing and genuine change, are separated by the entire distance of the interior work that the avoidant has or has not done. The missing can be completely real without the change having occurred. The reach can be completely genuine without the pattern having shifted. The interior orientation toward the person can be as present and as specific and as genuinely felt as has been described throughout this conversation. And the behavioral reality of what follows the reach can still be the familiar pattern of approach and retreat, warmth and management, presence and the subsequent distance that the proximity inevitably reactivates. Knowing this, really knowing it, not just intellectually but in the felt sense that changes how the reach is received when it arrives, is one of the more practically important aspects of understanding these signals accurately. It allows the person receiving the reach to hold it as what it actually is, not as more than it is, which would be allowing the hope to inflate its significance into something it is not carrying. Not as less than it is, which would be dismissing the genuine missing that produced it as irrelevant or manipulative or insufficient to acknowledge honestly, but as exactly what it is, the genuine missing finding the only available route, real, and not yet enough. The peripheral engagement signal warrants the same level of honest examination, because peripheral engagement, like the reach without reason, has layers that the surface description does not fully capture. The sustained peripheral engagement of an avoidant who is genuinely missing someone is real. It reflects the ongoing interior orientation, the fact that the person is still the reference point, still the location the attention keeps finding its way back to, still the specific named presence in the interior that the missing is directed toward. That reality is genuine and it is worth acknowledging accurately. But peripheral engagement is also, in a specific sense, the management at its most sophisticated. It is the form of ongoing connection that allows the avoidant to remain in the vicinity of the missing without ever having to close the distance into actual presence, without ever having to make the direct contact that would require the acknowledgement of the wanting, without ever having to inhabit the proximity that activates the fear that the entire pattern was built to manage. In this sense, peripheral engagement can function as a kind of indefinite equilibrium, a position that the avoidant can maintain without the specific discomfort of either genuine proximity or genuine severance. A middle territory that keeps the missing from becoming unbearable, because the person is still somehow in the orbit, still somehow within a kind of reach, still somehow present in the avoidance experience of the world through the indirect channel of peripheral awareness, without requiring the avoidant to do the thing that genuine presence would require. That equilibrium is comfortable for the avoidant. It is not comfortable for the person who is being peripherally engaged with rather than genuinely present with. The person who can feel the avoidant's peripheral presence, who can sense the ongoing orientation, the sustained adjacency, the specific quality of someone who is still in the vicinity without being actually there, tends to find that peripheral presence more disorienting than clean absence would be. Because it maintains the connection at the level of awareness without providing the connection at the level of actual, receivable present engagement, it keeps the hope alive without giving the hope anything to actually build on. It sustains the orientation toward the avoidant without providing anything that the orientation can actually land on and find solid. The peripheral engagement is real missing, and it is insufficient simultaneously, in exactly the way that the reach without reason is real missing and insufficient, simultaneously. The signals are genuine, the missing they reflect is genuine, and the genuineness of the missing does not resolve the insufficiency of the expression into something adequate. This is the honest accounting of what these signals mean, not the inflated version that reads them as the beginning of genuine change and sustained showing up, not the deflated version that dismisses them as meaningless or manipulative. The accurate version that holds them as what they actually are, the genuine interior reality of someone who is missing the person, finding the only routes the management makes available, and not yet doing the work that would make the missing into something the person can actually receive in the form they deserve to receive it. The third signal, the quality of the response when contact occurs, is the most internally revealing of the three. And it deserves careful examination because it is also the signal most vulnerable to misreading in both directions. The quality of the response reveals the interior reality most clearly because it is the least subject to deliberate management. The avoidant can manage the initiation of contact, can suppress the impulse to reach, can delay the response, can construct the thin reason that covers the actual motivation of the reach. They can manage the peripheral engagement, can calibrate the distance, can control the degree of adjacency, can ensure the peripheral presence remains peripheral rather than becoming the direct contact that would require more vulnerability. But the quality of the response in the moment of actual contact, particularly when the contact arrives unexpectedly, when the avoidance system has not had time to fully prepare the managed version of the response, is harder to control. The genuine interior state surfaces in the quality of the engagement before the management can intercept it fully. The warmth that was not supposed to be visible appears in the response. The quickness that reveals the ongoing orientation appears in the timing. The specific, detailed, genuinely interested engagement with the content of the contact appears in the substance of what is said. These are real. They are the interior reality briefly visible. The missing making itself known through the specific quality of what the avoidant produces when the filter was not fully deployed before the response was generated. But, and this is the but that the accurate picture requires even in the face of the genuine signal. The quality of the response in the unguarded moment is not the quality of the showing up in the ordinary days. It is the quality of a specific moment, a moment when the genuine interior was briefly more available than the management usually allows. A moment that is real and that does not represent the sustained behavioral reality of what the dynamic is actually providing across the ordinary texture of the days. The unguarded moment is evidence of what the interior contains. It is not evidence of what the behavior will sustain. And the distinction between those two things is the entire territory of the gap between the genuine feeling and the adequate expression of it that has been the central concern of this entire conversation. What to do with three signals that are simultaneously real and insufficient is the question that lands in the person who loves the avoidant when the accurate understanding of these signals is fully received. And it is a question that deserves genuine engagement rather than the premature resolution that either inflating or deflating the signals would provide. Inflating the signals, reading them as the evidence of imminent genuine change, as the beginning of the sustained showing up, as the proof that the gap between interior and behavior is closing, provides the resolution of hope. The comfortable, forward-oriented, this is going somewhere narrative that the hope naturally wants to construct from any available evidence. But that resolution is premature. The signals do not carry that evidence. They carry the evidence of genuine missing and insufficient expression, not of change. Deflating the signals, reading them as meaningless, as the manipulative behavior of someone who is using the peripheral presence and the thin reasoned reach to maintain access without genuine investment. As evidence that the avoidant is simply managing their own comfort rather than genuinely missing the person, provides the resolution of closure. The clear, forward-oriented, this is finished narrative that the hurt naturally wants to construct from the insufficient expression. But that resolution is also inaccurate. The signals are genuine. The missing is real. The interior orientation is not manufactured or strategic. It is the actual, felt, genuine wanting of someone whose system cannot adequately express it. The accurate position is in neither resolution. It is in the genuinely uncomfortable middle of holding the signals as exactly what they are, real and insufficient, genuine and not enough. Evidence of interior missing and not evidence of behavioral change. That middle is uncomfortable precisely because it does not resolve, does not provide the clear narrative that either hope or closure would offer. It requires the sustained presence in genuine uncertainty, the honest, clear-eyed, neither inflating nor deflating acknowledgement of a situation that has not yet produced the clarity that would make the choice between waiting and moving forward feel genuinely settled. Living in that genuine uncertainty without it becoming the organizing principle of one's own interior life is the specific practice that the accurate understanding of these signals calls for, not the resolution of the uncertainty through premature narrative, not the management of the uncertainty through the suppression of the genuine feeling that makes the uncertainty uncomfortable, but the genuine, patient, self-referencing presence in the actual condition, which is that the avoidant is genuinely missing the person and genuinely not yet showing up adequately, without allowing that condition to determine the quality or direction of the person's own life. The genuine uncertainty about the avoidance development belongs in the periphery of the person's interior, not at the center. The center belongs to the person's own genuine life, to the actual texture of the actual days, to the specific engagement with what is genuinely present and genuinely nourishing and genuinely worth showing up for with complete presence. The signals are peripheral information, accurate, honestly received, neither inflated nor deflated. Held in the appropriate place, the periphery, rather than the inappropriate place, the center, where they would become the organizing concern of a life that deserves to be organized around itself, rather than around the interpretation of an avoidance indirect expressions of genuine missing. There is something else worth naming about these three signals that tends to remain unexamined in conversations about avoidance psychology. The signals are produced by the avoidance system in conditions where the system has not found an adequate way to manage the missing. Where the missing is pressing against the management with enough genuine force that it finds roots, however indirect, however covert, however thoroughly covered by the thin reasons and the peripheral presence and the unguarded response quality, through the management and into expression. That pressure, the genuine missing pressing against the system, is information about what the person represented in the avoidance interior, about the specific quality of what the person brought to the dynamic that produced this degree of interior impact, about the authenticity and depth and particular quality of presence that reached past the defense without targeting it and established itself in the interior in the form of the genuine missing that these signals are expressing. That quality of impact is not produced by ordinary connection. The avoidance management handles ordinary connection without significant interior pressure. It handles the pleasant, low stakes, genuinely nice but not particularly deep connection without the genuine missing that produces these signals. The signals themselves, the reach without reason, the peripheral engagement, the quality of the unguarded response, are evidence of the depth of the impact, of the specific irreplaceable quality of what the person was and brought. But the depth of the impact on the avoidance interior and the avoidance capacity to translate that impact into adequate behavioral expression are two different things. The depth of the impact speaks to the quality of the person. The capacity to translate speaks to the development of the avoidant. And the person's quality does not determine the avoidance development, cannot be offered at a sufficient level to produce the development by its own force, cannot be the catalyst for change simply by being extraordinary enough. The person was extraordinary enough, is extraordinary enough. The signals are the evidence of that, of genuine impact made in a defended interior by someone who was simply being genuinely themselves. The extraordinariness of what they brought is not in question. What is in question is entirely the avoidance. Whether the genuine missing will become genuine motivation, whether the motivation will become genuine work, whether the work will become genuine change, whether the change will become the showing up that the signals have been the insufficient substitute for, those questions belong to the avoidant. Their answers belong to the avoidant. The choice belongs to the avoidant. What belongs to the person who is receiving these signals, who is accurately reading the genuine missing in the reach without reason, the peripheral engagement, the quality of the unguarded response, is the honest, clear-eyed, self-respecting decision about what to do with the accurate reading. Not the decision that hope dictates, not the decision that hurt dictates, the decision that the full, honest, accurately held picture of the complete situation makes genuinely available. A picture that includes the genuine missing and the insufficient expression, the real interior and the inadequate behavior, the something inside them that refused to stop loving, and the something that has not yet found the way to make that refusal into the showing up it deserves to become. All of it true, all of it held, without the inflation that hope provides and without the deflation that hurt provides. Just the truth, received honestly, in the appropriate place in the interior, the periphery, not the center. While the center remains, as it should, occupied by the actual life. The genuine, forward-moving, fully inhabited, completely present life that has never required the avoidance development to complete itself before being worth showing up for completely. That life is the center. The signals are the periphery, and the person who knows the difference between those two things, who has genuinely arrived at the accurate picture and placed it in its appropriate location in the interior, is someone who is no longer navigating from confusion. They are navigating from clarity, which is not the same as navigating from certainty about the outcome, clarity about what is true, not certainty about what will happen. Both of those things available simultaneously, without the one requiring the other. Clarity is enough. It has always been enough. It is in the end the only thing that was ever genuinely required. To see clearly and choose from what is clearly seen. That is the whole of it. And it is sufficient for whatever comes next. The clarity that comes from reading these signals accurately does not always feel like clarity in the moment of receiving it. That is worth acknowledging honestly, because the description of clarity tends to carry an implied lightness, the sense of fog lifting, of confusion resolving, of the path forward becoming visible in a way that makes the next step feel obvious and manageable. The actual experience of arriving at genuine clarity about a situation that involves real love and real loss and real unresolved feeling tends to be heavier than that. It carries the specific weight of seeing something fully that was easier to live with when it was partially obscured. The hope-colored partial picture, for all its inaccuracy, had a kind of comfort in it, the comfort of the possible, the comfort of the not yet determined, the comfort of a situation that had not yet fully revealed itself and therefore still contained the versions of the future where everything resolved into what the genuine feeling on both sides would ideally have produced. Full clarity closes some of those versions. Not permanently. The future is genuinely open, and what the avoidant does with their own interior process is genuinely unknown. But it closes the version that was not actually supported by the evidence. The version where the signals were evidence of imminent change. The version where the genuine missing was already the beginning of the showing up. The version where the reach without reason and the peripheral engagement and the quality of the unguarded response were pointing toward the sustained, consistent, ordinary day's presence that genuine love deserves to become. Those versions were available in the partial picture. They are less available in the full one, and the loss of their availability is a real loss. Small, perhaps, compared to the larger loss of the connection itself. But real. The loss of the comfortable versions of the possible is its own specific grief that the arrival of genuine clarity tends to produce. Sitting with that grief, the grief of the foreclosed, comfortable versions of the possible, is part of what genuine clarity requires. Not the suppression of it in the name of the clarity being the better, healthier, more self-respecting position to be in. It is a better position, and it still carries a cost, and the cost deserves honest acknowledgement rather than the immediate conversion of the grief into something more comfortable, through the reassurance that clarity is worth it. It is worth it, and it hurts, both simultaneously, without the one cancelling the other. The grief of seeing clearly what was actually present and what was not, what the signals actually meant and what they did not mean. What was genuine in the avoidance interior and what was insufficient in the avoidance behavior, what the connection was at its most real and what it was unable to become, given the specific limitations of the person who was in it with the person who loved them. All of that grief is appropriate. All of it is the honest emotional response to a genuine loss seen without the buffer of the partial picture. And all of it deserves to move through at its own pace, without the pressure to complete itself on a timeline determined by the idea that clarity should produce resolution faster than grief actually moves. Grief moves at its own pace. This is one of the things that tends to be most consistently underestimated in the context of the avoidant dynamic. Not the grief itself, which tends to be widely acknowledged as real and significant, but the pace of it. The specific, non-negotiable, cannot be accelerated pace of genuine emotional processing. The avoidant dynamic tends to produce a grief that is particularly slow-moving. Not because the love was deeper than other kinds of love, though it may have been, but because the specific structure of the dynamic, the ambiguity, the partial picture, the genuine feeling on both sides, the ongoing signals that are real but insufficient, the not-over quality that resists clean closure, creates conditions in which the grief cannot proceed at the pace that clean endings allow. Clean endings have a definitive object. The relationship is over, the person is gone, the task is to integrate the loss of something that is unambiguously finished. The grief has a clear reference point, and the processing, however painful, has a direction. The avoidant dynamic tends not to produce clean endings, tends to produce the ambiguous, partial, neither fully present nor fully absent situation that has been described throughout this conversation. The genuine missing is real. The signals are present. The interior orientation is ongoing. And none of that resolves into the clean ending that would allow the grief to proceed as clean grief. So it proceeds as ambiguous grief. Slower, more recursive, more likely to circle back to the same material rather than moving steadily through it. More likely to be interrupted by the arrival of new signals. The reach without reason, the peripheral engagement, the quality of the unguarded response that restart the processing rather than allowing it to complete. Allowing ambiguous grief to move at its own pace without requiring it to resolve into something cleaner than the situation actually warrants is genuinely difficult. Because the pressure to resolve, to arrive at either the clean hope of imminent return or the clean closure of genuine ending, is real. It comes from the internal discomfort of sustained ambiguity. It comes from the people around the person who love them and want their pain to resolve. It comes from the implicit cultural script that says grief should move through stages and arrive at acceptance, and that staying in the ambiguous middle for extended periods means something has gone wrong with the processing. Nothing has gone wrong with the processing. The processing is accurately responding to the actual conditions. The actual conditions are ambiguous. The grief is therefore ambiguous. The pace is therefore slower than clean-ending grief would be. All of this is appropriate. All of this is the honest, accurate, genuine emotional response to the genuine complexity of the situation. The permission to grieve at the pace the grief requires, without the pressure to resolve it into something cleaner than the situation warrants, is one of the more important things the person in this dynamic can extend to themselves. Not as permission to remain organizationally focused on the avoidant indefinitely, but as the genuine acknowledgement that the processing takes the time it takes, and the taking of that time is not a failure of healing or an indulgence of unnecessary pain. It is the honest pace of genuine processing, and it deserves the respect of not being rushed. Within the ambiguous grief, within the honest pace of its moving, the signals continue to arrive, the reach without reason, the peripheral engagement, the quality of the unguarded response. They do not stop simply because the accurate picture has been arrived at. They continue as the ongoing expression of the avoidance genuine missing, produced by the interior reality that the management cannot fully suppress. And each arrival requires the same honest reception, not the inflated reading, not the deflated reading, the accurate one, real and insufficient, genuine and not enough. Evidence of interior missing and not evidence of behavioral change. That repetitive requirement, the repeated return to the accurate reading rather than the hope-inflated or hurt-deflated version, is not the evidence of something wrong with the person's processing. It is the normal, expected, entirely appropriate requirement of a situation that keeps generating new instances of the same genuine ambiguity. Each signal arrival is a new instance. Each new instance deserves the same honest reception, and the receiving it honestly again and again, without the accumulated weight of the repetition converting it into either dismissal or inflation, is itself a form of genuine work. The work of staying accurate in the face of genuine feeling, of seeing clearly when the emotional pull is toward the comfortable distortion in one direction or the other, of maintaining the honest position not because it is easy, but because it is the only position from which genuine choices can actually be made. The genuine choices. This is where the examination of the signals ultimately needs to land. Not in a psychological description of what the signals mean and what the avoidant is experiencing and what the genuine missing reflects about the depth of the connection. All of that is valuable as the foundation for clarity. But the purpose of clarity is to make genuine choice possible. And genuine choice requires not just the accurate picture, but the genuine self-knowledge to know what to do with it. What to do with the accurate picture of three signals that reflect genuine missing and insufficient expression is entirely personal. Entirely dependent on the specific person and the specific circumstances and the specific sense of what they actually need and want from their own genuine life at this particular point in it. Some people, with the full accurate picture clearly held, will decide that the genuine missing, the real interior orientation, the sustained peripheral presence, the quality that surfaces in the unguarded response, warrants a specific kind of continued openness. Not the open waiting of someone who is structuring their life around the avoidance development, But the open, self-complete, genuinely forward-moving kind of availability that says I am living my life fully, and if the avoidant does the work that would make the showing up genuine, I am not closed to what that might become. Others, with the same accurate picture, will find that the sustained ambiguity of the signals and what they represent is itself the thing that is no longer compatible with the full, uncompromised inhabitation of their own genuine life. That the peripheral presence is more disorienting than clarifying. That the reach without reason keeps reactivating the grief rather than allowing it to process. That the accurate reading, however honest, is costing more in ongoing interpretive labor than the continued holding of the situation warrants. Both of those responses are legitimate. Both are expressions of genuine self-knowledge, honestly applied to the accurate picture. Neither is the failure of healing, or the wrong choice, or the insufficient response to the complexity of the situation. What would be the insufficient response? The response that does not serve the person's genuine well-being or the honest engagement with the situation is the response that is not actually a choice, the default. The continuation of the current state, not because the person has genuinely decided that continuation serves their life, but because the ambiguity of the situation has not been resolved into the clean ending that would prompt a genuine decision. The default continuation is the one that keeps the person in the interpretive labor of ongoing signal reading without the genuine, clear-eyed decision about whether that labor is worth what it costs. It is the neither waiting nor moving position that the ambiguity of the avoidant dynamic creates, and that the absence of a genuine choice sustains indefinitely. That default deserves to be interrupted, not by the forced resolution of the ambiguity into something cleaner than it actually is, but by the genuine, honest, self-respecting engagement with the question of what the person actually wants to do with the accurate picture. Not what hope suggests, not what hurt recommends, what the genuine self, the one that has done its own work, reclaimed its own interior, arrived at the clarity that the full picture provides, what that self actually wants for the life that belongs to it. That question is the most important one available. It is the one that converts clarity from an understanding into a foundation, from knowing into choosing, from the accurate picture into the genuine, self-authored, freely made decision about what comes next. The signals told you something real. The real thing they told you does not determine what you do with it. That determination belongs entirely to you. To the genuine, clear-eyed, fully informed version of you that has arrived at this picture through honest engagement with everything the dynamic has produced and everything the accurate reading reveals. What do you want? Not from the avoidant, not in relation to the signals or the missing or the insufficient expression of genuine interior reality, but from your life, your actual, present, genuinely yours, completely inhabitable life. What do you want it to look like? What do you want to be doing in it? Who do you want to be building it with? Answer those questions honestly, from the full, genuine, clear-eyed self that has done enough of its own work to answer from genuine knowledge rather than from the hope or the hurt or the comfortable versions of the possible that the partial picture was sustaining. Answer them, and then build accordingly. That is the whole of what the signals, accurately read, ultimately make possible. Not the answer about the avoidant, the answer about yourself, which was always the more important question and which is now finally available to be answered from the only foundation worth building on. Genuine clarity, honestly held, about what is real and what you actually want, from the life that is yours, right now, without waiting for anyone else's signals to resolve into something they have not yet become. The answer you find, when you answer honestly, will not arrive fully formed, it will arrive in pieces. In the quiet moments when the interpretive labor is temporarily still, and what remains is simply the person and their own genuine sense of what they need. Trust those moments. They carry more accurate information than the signals do, more reliable information than the hoping, or the hurting, or the ongoing reading of an avoidance indirect expressions of genuine missing. The signals are real, they have been read accurately, and they point inward now, not toward the avoidance interior, but toward yours, toward what you actually want. That is the only direction worth looking.